What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. I'm your host. My name is Jeff Willis. This is my co-host over here to my right, Tim Willis. Before we get the show started here, guys, just a quick reminder, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, give us all a follow on X or Twitter. You can follow our executive producer, Aldo Gandia, at Barroom Network. You can follow me at _ Jeff Willis, and you can follow my partner over here, Tim, at Tim Willis 24. So without further ado, let's get this thing going. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about here tonight, guys. There's some interesting reporting going on. We gave you guys our thoughts on some of the initial coaches that were presented last week. We'll dig into that a little bit more. We may even discuss a little bit of the upcoming national championship game. I see Jay Grizz is already in the chat. I gave you a shout out right at the beginning of the show last week, seeing if you were in there, but I don't think you were ever in the live chat, Jay Grizz. But it's good to see you tonight. And we got, like I said, we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. There's an article I want to get into later tonight that was really a pretty decent bombshell dropped on the process that the Bears have had in the last couple of coaching searches. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And before we get started here, though, let me ask you, Tim, what were your thoughts on some of the reports of the last week going on with the coaching search, our initial thoughts last week on who we thought were our favorite candidates? Why don't you refresh some of the viewers' memories on who you like and who you want to see going forward in the upcoming second interviews?
Well, first, I want to apologize, everybody. My camera's not very good. My good camera that I have broke, so I'm using just the standard computer camera, so it's not very good. So I apologize for that. But yeah, into those coaches, Jeff. As far as second interviews go, I talked about it last week at length. I really liked Mike Vrabel. That's obviously not the case. I was pretty well wrong about that because I thought that it wasn't a done deal in New England, and it clearly was. That moved so fast. Really a pretty crappy way for New England to handle that situation, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about the Bears here. But of the candidates that are out there, I would love to see second interviews. Obviously, Ben Johnson would be. I want to see a second interview there. We talked last week if Mike McCarthy entered the sweepstakes that was somebody who would immediately jump into our top five. I would like to see him get a second interview. I wouldn't mind seeing Pete Carroll get a second interview, although I think that's unlikely at this point. There's some rumors going around about his interview, but again, we don't know anything about that. I would still like to see the first interview with Joe Brady, but then I'd like to see the second along with it, obviously. And at that point, then it kind of just falls off a little bit. Those really, in my opinion, are the top four. And those are really, I will say, I do think it's more of a 4-horse race. You could maybe include David Shaw in that. Greg Gabriel's a big fan of him. If you guys haven't watched Greg's shows or seen him on other podcasts, he's a big fan of David Shaw. At this point, I don't know if Todd Monken is a really strong candidate. He did interview today. I just don't know how strong of a candidate he truly is. And like I said, of the names that I just mentioned, I think those are likely. I don't know about finalists at this point because I don't think we can really speculate that until we really see where these second interviews come from. But those are the ones I would certainly like to see get a second interview. And I would, if I had to bet right now, I would say that those 4 or 5 names are the likely to get those second interviews and would be in the horse race, if you will. Just my opinion on it. But like I said, I'm still waiting on the Joe Brady first interview. As far as I understood, he was available to interview this week, I thought. And obviously that hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure that Brady's interviewed anywhere yet. So maybe he's not really interested in interviewing for those head coaching positions. I have no idea. I haven't heard anything from Joe Brady's camp. I will tell you that I watched some of Joe Brady's press conferences. He's really impressive, Jeff. I'm not going to lie. He's very, very impressive. Now, obviously, the football part, the acumen is outstanding, top tier, one of the best offensive minds in football at this point in time. But I was very impressed with the man and how he was not afraid to take accountability, even for small things, which, it's a breath of fresh air considering Flus would like double down on himself all the time and never take responsibility. until it got to the point where they were kind of like, hey, you probably need to start taking some responsibility. But yeah, very, very strong personality in those interviews. And I really appreciated how he did take the accountability. And like I said, for very small things, even like, well, I should have ran the ball here and that's on me. And just all kinds of stuff like that. And very impressive, very impressive. I saw a little bit more of Ben Johnson. He's impressive. I'm just still not sold that he has that leader mentality. Now, granted, that could be different for everybody. Like some guys have the rah-rah. Other guys, they're just quiet, but they have I think Mike McCarthy's one of those, quiet, reserved guys as far as that goes, but the teams clearly follow him. He's clearly an excellent leader. He does a very good job with his teams. So again, that can be different. Not everybody's got that, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Lions head coach right now.
Dan Campbell.
What's that?
Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell, thank you. I kept thinking Dan Quinn, which Dan Quinn's probably very similar personality, but yeah, Dan Campbell's just got that fiery personality. And Aaron Glenn is another one that has the same thing. And I didn't mention Aaron Glenn's name, but I think he's another one that's, certainly in that mix. At this point, though, Jeff, I got to be honest. What's that?
You're an impressive interview too.
Yeah. I just think at this point they're really, I think they're really going to push for an offensive-minded coach at this point. I'm not really sure that I think they would take a defensive-minded coach if he just blew them away, and they were really sold on what his staff is going to be. I just think at this point they want to do what makes sense for the position that they're in, and I think you almost have to do that. Although I was, like I said, I was the first to say that Vrabel was my choice, if he's my top choice. But again, I just think that they are looking for that offensive coach. And if you guys watched Caleb Williams on the St. Brothers podcast, which was excellent, by the way, he mentions that he really wants an offensive coach. And I do think that they're really going to take words.
We've got a clip we'll show you guys.
He did specifically say that he wanted an offensive-minded head coach.
He selfishly wanted an offensive-minded coach. Like, I really want, you know what I mean? That's why I kind of corrected you there. So
right, but my point being, though, that's clearly what he wants. And I do believe, and I was just talking to you about this before the show, Jeff, I truly believe that they are going to take Caleb's word into account. I think they're going to listen to him more than what they're obviously letting off. I think his opinion really will matter in a big way. I mean, this is your franchise quarterback. You got to keep him happy. If it's somebody he doesn't want, you can't bring him in. So, again, like I said, that's just my 2 cents on the situation and the coaches that are available. We got some clips for you guys we'll play later from that St. Brown Brothers podcast. And if you have not watched it yet, go watch it. It was excellent. I really like the St. Brown Brothers. I really like EQ clearly for his Notre Dame ties and his Bears ties. I think Amon-Ra probably should dye his hair back, but he looked a little goofy with that. But he's a lion, thick and thin, and his team is good. They're winning games right now. So, but we'll get into that later, Jeff. Do you have any thoughts on that interview specifically that you took to heart, or that spoke to you a little more about everything, and what'd you come away with there?
Are you talking about the St. Brown Bros podcast?
Yeah, the St. Brown Brothers podcast, yeah.
I mean, you guys really ought to check that out if you haven't yourselves, because I thought it was really, really good. And it really kind of gave us a glimpse. Before the draft, we've talked about this, ad nauseum in the past, but, there was a lot of talk about Caleb and his personality and how he really was, and, what kind of guy he was off the field, what kind of study habits he had, what kind of person he was, all that kind of stuff. All that was discussed at length, and obviously most of it was wrong, as we said before, but this interview he did really kind of gives you a glimpse into how, the kind of person that Caleb is. He's a really laid back guy. You can tell he really wants to be there. And we've got a couple clips here. We'll show him here in a minute, actually, because there's one point where he's talking about just like what he's looking for in a coach and things of that nature. He's talking about like his experiences, and all these different things. It's a nice little dig into his life and how he is. And there's a point where he's actually talking about in this video the kind of coach he wants I talked about before, but he kind of digs into like why he would want to be there for like an offensive guy. As Tim said, why he would want it to be an offensive guy, because he can be there for the next like 15 to 20 years. And you'll see that in the clip. But that shows to me a guy who that was really, it was good to me, because after the year that the team had last year, it was so bad. There was a lot of disappointing stuff going on. They didn't have a winning record by any stretch. They won 5 games. It was just a rough season all around. For a guy to say after that season he had that he still wanted to be here long-term like that was big to me. And I really appreciated that he'd said that. So we'll show you guys the clip. Viso Joe mentions that in that clip, he
agreed
throwing some shade at Flus, and he definitely was.
Well, just to piggyback that real quick, Jeff, he even said they asked him about his coach's influence or his coaching influences. Never once mentioned Flus there. Talking about the game management and the time management at the end of games, definitely throwing some shade at Flus there. I think he very clearly never was a fan of Flus. He just kind of got handcuffed to him. But yeah, I haven't really heard Caleb have a single good comment to make about Flus from the time he was drafted until now. And it's kind of funny how he's not afraid to throw some of that shade. It just shows how that locker room really was with him. But that's another thing real quick. He made an interesting point about the locker room, how he's never been on a team that the locker room gelled like the Bears locker room does. And even through all the losses and the struggles that they went through, that team, the locker room was always the same. He did make a mention of that, and I thought that was really interesting considering.
Well, yes, but there's obviously still, he can say that, but there's almost a little discouraging because of the way that things went with, some of the players throughout the season and stuff, and it's just, I'm glad that they're close, but it's got to be more than that. They've got to be able to go above and beyond to do the things they need to do to be really consistent winners. And we'll see if a new coaching staff coming in can actually put that into place. So let's show you guys a couple of clips real quick. The first one we'll show, this is Caleb talking about, if you guys, Jay Grizz, you'll appreciate this because he's talking about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame and how, I believe the question was asked to him if about him being requested to interview that if they reached out to him and whatnot. And he goes into detail about it a little bit here. So let's show you the clip.
I heard the Bears are interviewing or want to interview their head coach. Is that
media?
Is that real?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, I'm about to say.
Why not? I haven't been.
Why not? I mean, if I'm Freeman, I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me just stay put here.
I would stay put.
Great coach.
Because, yeah, I would stay. I mean, he built everything over there. I mean,
right.
But if they interview him, we'll see. We'll see if he takes that.
So I did think it was interesting the way he kind of smirked at that, like he wouldn't mind, you know what I mean? Marcus Freeman, by all accounts, is a guy that players want to run through a wall for. Everybody who's ever played for him loves the guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if, he immediately got the following of his players in Chicago too. It's just obviously there's more to coaching than that. But that being said, I thought it was a little interesting that he made the comments that he did there and the little smirk that he made. But yeah, I tend to agree with him. If I'm Marcus Freeman, I would stay there too. The one argument I would make against that is I wouldn't say he built everything in Notre Dame. Brian Kelly kind of laid the foundation. As much disdain as I have towards Brian Kelly, because I'm not a fan of the guy at all by any stretch. He did build the foundation Notre Dame, but Marcus Freeman has taken them over the top. That's the difference. So if he wins a national championship, that's the icing on the cake there. But he's done more for Notre Dame in the past 3 years than Brian Kelly did the entire time he was there. So, and that's saying something. So in any case, I thought that was interesting because he is the kind of guy that will get a lot out of his players. Aldo mentions in the chat here that Notre Dame only has 1 5-star recruit and Ohio State has about a dozen. That recruiting in Notre Dame is very rough because of the GPA requirements. And that's absolutely true. I have heard in the past several years that they lowered that GPA requirement, which has made it a bit easier, but still it's very hard to get some of the elite level talent if they don't have the grades. So, but they do still do a pretty good job of recruiting. They have Bryant Young's son at Notre Dame right now, who's a freak athlete. And if you guys don't know, Bryant Young's a Hall of Famer from the 49ers. But they've got several pieces there that have some real potential at Notre Dame, and they are recruiting better with Marcus Freeman than they did with Brian Kelly. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see their next few classes here. But I like the idea of Marcus Freeman interviewing. He hasn't done it yet, but we'll have to wait and see if he actually accepts that interview. He just got an extension for Notre Dame, if you guys aren't aware yet. So we'll see. But I like the idea of an interview. I don't particularly think he's ready yet for the NFL level quite yet, at least to win. And the Bears need somebody who can come in and get them ready to go. And as much as the players will love to play for him, I just don't know that he's that guy yet.
I just think it would be really hard for him to build the relationships to get coordinators just because he hasn't had any experience in the NFL. Yeah. And it's going to be very hard to get good coordinators who can run NFL offenses and defenses. I think he has one on staff that could probably step in and be the defensive coordinator. That's Al Golden. I think he'd be fine in the NFL, probably better than fine. But I just think it'd be very hard for him to find an offensive mind that could run an NFL offense without having those connections, without being in the NFL for at least some some time, a little bit of time there. So I agree. I don't think Marcus Freeman is ready for the job, and I don't think he should leave either. I think he's building something there. They're a very solid team. He just signed that deal. I mean, there's a buyout, but it's tough to get out of that. So I think he's there to stay, and I'm glad. I want him to stay at Notre Dame because we're finally having some great success right now with him there. If he wins the national championship, I mean, he's already the best coach at Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, he'll be a legend just like that. Yes.
So, yep. I mean, that's just how Notre Dame is. I mean, we grew up 15 minutes from the stadium, guys. If you didn't know, I grew up in Mishawaka my whole life. So
really, we're closer than that until we were about 5 years old.
That's true. We were born in South Bend. So, I mean, it's, it's just a matter of being around and understanding that dynamic. And a guy like that coming to Chicago and winning would be big. But, I agree with a lot of you guys in the chat. I just don't think it's time for that yet. He's not really an option for me either. So let's show this other clip we have where he's actually talking about most of us who have him as our favorite candidate as Ben Johnson. Tim, I think you had him as your second favorite, but everybody's got him up there at the top of their list. So let's show you guys this clip of him talking about Ben Johnson with the St. Brown brothers, who obviously Amon-Ra plays for Detroit, and Ben Johnson.
If you could, build your head coach, what are some qualities that you'd want in your next head coach?
Strong-minded, a leader of men. I think that's a cool thing about what y'all got over there in Detroit.
So do you feel like, sorry about that, do you feel like your coach, you want your coach to be offensive minded, or you want him big picture?
I want him,
and then have the coordinators.
Selfishly, I want an offensive minded guy, so I can build with him and be with that coach for the next 19, 17, 15 years, and so I can also learn and grow and things like that from him and what he's seen and what he's gone through with maybe other QBs or been around. So that's selfishly. But if we get a overall grand scheme coach and is good with time management, good with the clock, good with helping control the game, just because it's a big factor, obviously, and in our game when we played our first time at y'all's place, big factor. It's being able to help control the clock. And then, helping find the right guys to win championships. That's the only goal that I have for my NFL career is to go win a championship and championships. Start with one.
Just so you know, I told Ben Caleb is fucking trash. You don't want to go there.
That's all right.
That's what I told Ben.
So I
mean, what he's going to do with that information?
Yeah, when he does the information, it's all
Caleb.
good.
I said Caleb's a diva. He's a selfish motherfucker. He's going to want everything on his own. Thinks he's the smartest guy in the world. Not coachable. So, Ben, he already knows.
That's love.
I'm on. He's gone. Fucking say goodbye. Let him go.
Hey, but that's love, though.
Let him
go.
Let him go.
That's love from you.
Let him.
That's love.
Let him go. Let him
That's
go.
love, right?
No, that's love.
And just like if they ask me, like, if anyone's gonna ask me how's Ben, Ben's trash.
Terrible.
He
He's
can't
the worst.
call plays.
Let him
He can't
go.
lead us. He's not tough
Right.
on us. He doesn't
Exactly.
Yeah,
He doesn't
exactly.
hold everybody accountable.
I don't know why you
Everybody's
want
not
him,
on the
like-
same level. Like, yeah, I mean, I would for sure. If I would do the same thing Josh Allen did when they
Right,
talked
you saw
about
that?
Joe Brady.
Yeah, like,
Like, I'm gonna talk so much trash about him, and then I'm gonna go back to our org and be like, pay this man some more money so he can stay.
yeah, exactly.
That's what I do.
Shit. Yeah. Fuck.
But yeah, but things like that, and then just a dude that's got a fire to him. I don't want people that doesn't have a fire. I think I got a certain fire about me inside of me that, you know what I mean, that
Right.
Mhm.
certain people can't coach or certain people can't be around or it doesn't work in that way. And so yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And so if it's Ben, then
Nigga said.
you know what I mean?
Sheesh.
If it's not, then it is what it is.
I mean,
He's not staying in Detroit. GG's.
if it's Ben, I'd be hurt and be sick.
So, okay. That to me kind of says a lot. So there's a couple things here. Number one, there's a mutual respect there, obviously, for the St. Brown brothers and Caleb. They clearly like the guy. You know, when they're saying that shit like Caleb's trash and all, they're obviously joking. He's saying that to Ben Johnson because he doesn't want Johnson to leave to go to Chicago. And that's the other point I wanted to make is like, that's something. And again, he says at the end of the show, I'm going to be sick. Thank you, Aldo, for mentioning that. So it's like at the end of that clip, I should say, I'm going to be sick if he leaves. They don't want him to go. And if he goes to the Bears, they really don't want him to go there because they know how good he is. And Amon-Ra is obviously a clear fan of him. He don't want him to go there. So that should say something to Bears fans too. Is like, if anybody thinks that there's like real issues with whether or not he can lead, you know, you look no further to what the Lions think about, Lions players think about him. Now, whether he can get in front of an entire team and lead is another thing entirely. So there is risk there. There's a couple comments in here, and I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was 3.5. One of them said that Mike McCarthy was low risk, medium reward, and Ben Johnson was high risk, high reward. I would say I don't know if it's high risk, but there is risk absolutely involved with Ben Johnson. There is risk, but there is a very high reward. And as I said last week, Ben Johnson's got by far the highest ceiling at any of these coaching candidates. So I see where you guys are some of you guys are coming from with the inexperience and stuff. I understand that. I really do. But again, it's like that ceiling is so, I mean, if we really want the Bears to reach and get it to the threshold that we want them to get over, you kind of lean towards that upside. And I understand the McCarthy thing too. I like McCarthy. As I told you guys last week, he immediately jumps into my top 5 if he's available. So I wouldn't hate it if they hired him. I just think that the ceiling is higher with Ben Johnson there than it is with Mike McCarthy, in my opinion, even though he has won a Super Bowl. So again, though, he has won a Super Bowl. He has had success in both Dallas and Green Bay. The guy's done it with multiple quarterbacks, so it's a matter of, can he get them to winning the Super Bowl and maybe multiple Super Bowls? I don't doubt that he can raise their floor up higher. No doubt in my mind about that. So I like that part of it. It's just a matter of, are they willing to tie themselves to the young guy who's got the higher ceiling, or the guy who's been there, done that, but you really don't know how far he can actually take you. So I don't know. He's, like I said, there's been some middling seasons and stuff in there with McCarthy, even some poor seasons. So it's just like, again, the ceiling with Ben Johnson is like, to me, that's the ultimate, what would take it over the top if you're going to make that higher. But again, I wouldn't hate McCarthy either. It's just a matter of what the Bears decide they want to do. But I do think it's interesting the way Caleb was commenting on him in that interview. He clearly likes the guy, and he would clearly play for him and want to play for him. So I think if he's going to have his, if he's going to have some influence in this process, I wouldn't doubt if he had a little bit more inkling towards Johnson than McCarthy, being a young quarterback and seeing what Johnson's been doing. He's a hot commodity right now, and he does run more of that Shanahan style offense than McCarthy does. So if they have a preference for that offense as well, that's another thing you got to consider. So and 3.5 says if he was Poles, he'd gamble on higher Johnson. I'm kind of leaning that way myself. 3.5. Like I said, that ceiling, that potential, you don't know how good he could be. As I said last week, everybody's looking for the next Shanahan, the next LaFleur, the next McVay. Everybody wants that. So if you have that guy, I think he's the only real guy in this cycle who could be that kind of guy. I think you hire him, in my opinion. I think you hire him. So
I actually disagree with that last statement. I don't think he's the only guy in this cycle. And this is where, if you look at years past, it's very rare that the hot candidate, the hot coordinator, is typically the one that has the most success following. It's actually very rare. I'm not saying that I don't think Ben Johnson can be that guy, because there's a lot to really like about him. And at some point, I would agree, there's a lot of people clamoring, well, why can't the Bears just go get the number one candidate every year? Why do they always got to find some nobody and bring him in instead of bringing the hot guy? For whatever reason, they haven't done that. And, I will tell you this, like, if they hired Ben Johnson, you would hear no qualms from me. I would be ecstatic. I think he can be a great coach, and he clearly has a very innovative and very good offense. There's no question about it. Again, like we've been talking about, it's can he lead an entire team, which we don't know yet. That's where you would lean maybe towards Mike McCarthy if you want someone experienced. And you can't argue with what Mike McCarthy has done. The guy has 11 playoff appearances, 11 playoff wins. I mean, you can't argue those stats. And I know people probably don't like him partially because he is from he coached in Green Bay first, but you tell me he don't want to go out there and kill Green Bay right now. I think he probably would.
Look at Ben Johnson's record as the offensive coordinator in the division. He's got 2 losses, 2 in the division.
Yep.
In a division with Green Bay and not Minnesota, obviously, who's had a great season this year too, until they lost last week. So you got to consider that as well.
Listen, I'm not arguing for or against either one right now. I'm just bringing out points about both of them. And I think what a lot of people aren't giving McCarthy credit for is the guy won in Dallas. And Dallas is not a good organization. I'm sorry. I don't care what anybody says. They have a ton of money, and they have spent and they have drafted on their trenches. Their lines are very good. And it's, that's where you have to start. But McCarthy won with Dak, and I'm sorry, but Dak is an above average quarterback. He's not in that elite tier. Dak's a good quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback, and he's been winning with Dak. 3 straight 12-5 seasons is very impressive. I don't care where you're at. That's hard to do with any organization to win 3 years in a row like that, and to have a great record at that. I mean, I just think that.
Before you go on, there's an interesting point you made, and Aldo made a similar point too. And I'll get into that in just a second. But it's interesting. Here's the thing between McCarthy and Ben Johnson, okay? And this is an X factor here, is if Ben Johnson comes in, yeah, I mean, you got to consider the offensive line play he's had in Detroit. And the same thing with McCarthy. And I'll get to McCarthy in a second. But Ben Johnson has had a really good offensive line in Detroit, and it's been a big part of their success. The Bears do not have that currently. So is he going to be able to make that translate? I said to you guys last week, if you were here, that I felt like if they hire Ben Johnson, he should be a part of the draft and development process, and whoever else they bring in as far as offensive linemen are concerned. And I want to know what his plan is in his interview to develop these guys if I'm the Bears. Okay, and what we want to do about the offensive line to get them to a point where our offense is rolling like they have in Detroit. On the other side of that coin, Mike McCarthy, as you were just talking about, Tim, this is one thing that's a very positive thing about Mike McCarthy. He's got one of the best offensive line coaches in the league with the Cowboys, and I think he's been with them in Green Bay as well, but I'm not 100% on that one. And I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me now, but he's one of the better offensive line coaches in the entire league. He has worked wonders in Dallas with everybody they've brought in as high draft picks. Let's name them through for real quick. Quentin Nelson, stud. been a stud with. I mean, he's one of
Not
the best
Quentin
guards in the
Nelson,
league.
Zach Martin.
I'm sorry, Zach Martin. I don't know why I said both Notre Dame.
Both Notre
players.
Dame.
So Zach Martin, one of the best guards in the league, Dallas drafted him. He's been developed with that offensive line coach. Also, they've got Tyler Guyton, who was drafted this past year. He's been pretty good. He had one of the better pressure percentages in the entire league this season. Let me think. Who else they got over there right now? Tyler Smith. I was just going to say Tyler Smith.
Tyron Smith.
He's the guy who they drafted in the first round a couple years ago. A lot of teams saw him more as a guard. He bounced around between tackle and guard as a rookie, and he played phenomenally. And he's been really good the last couple of years now. So that's all they do in Dallas is draft offensive linemen and churn them out and make them better. They just make every time they take one, they develop them. So that's one thing about Mike McCarthy that's a huge positive for me. If they hired him, I would be very confident that they would get the offensive line fixed. Now, it's the other aspects of the offense. How innovative can he be? Can he be the same level as Ben Johnson? I don't think so. So
that's where I would bring that argument. That's where I would bring that argument and agree with you. And somebody made a comment here that Ben Johnson's offense is 2025 and Mike McCarthy's is 2010. And that's a fair assessment, in my opinion, because he has not really been an innovator. He's kind of been running in the same offense. The one thing that I will say, though, is his offense is very, very, very quarterback friendly, especially for a young quarterback. He is going to do a great job of helping his quarterback. 1-2 reads, boom, get out of the pocket. Play a lot under center.
Most of the best years of Rodgers' career were under Mike McCarthy.
Yes, Dak's too.
You can't argue that.
Dak's too. Dak had a resurgent 2023 year when Mike McCarthy was calling plays. So, guys, I mean, a lot of people think that Mike McCarthy is kind of like the John Fox hire of a few years back. This is not a John Fox hire. It's not even close.
He's an offensive guy.
Well, I don't mean it just that way. It's the old head coach that, he's not won anything in a while. But Mike McCarthy's different. He's a different animal than John Fox.
Had Peyton Manning at the end of his prime. It's a lot different than walking into what, Mike McCarthy was walking into in his last couple situations.
Yes. So I like I said, I like both of those two, but I also want to throw another name out there, Jeff, that I don't think he's getting enough recognition. And you and I have talked about this a few times. I'm certainly higher on him than you are, I think, but I think we really need to start talking about Joe Brady in the same kind of conversation that we're talking about Ben Johnson. Joe Brady, in my opinion, has done more with less than what Ben Johnson has done in Detroit. You could make an argument that he's been even more innovative in his year and a half as the play caller than Ben Johnson has been in Detroit. You could also make the argument.
Offensive line of Buffalo too, though.
They do, but it is not Detroit's offensive line, though. It is not even close. They've just been consistent. I will agree with that. That is the difference, is that Josh Allen is better, but Josh Allen has also played a lot better with Joe Brady as his OC, and he's kind of unlocked that next tier of Josh Allen's game that he has not had unlocked yet. And the run game is phenomenal there. I just think that he has done a phenomenal job with that offense. And if we're being honest, he outcoached Ben Johnson in that game in Detroit. Just outcoached him, and they outplayed them, period. The Buffalo offense was better than Detroit's offense in that game. You can't argue it. So, yes, the sample size is not great. He's only been an offensive coordinator for a year and a half. He had a bad stop in Carolina, but let's face reality, scenery does make a big difference, and it is important. I mean, we just talked about this the other day, Jeff, you and I, with Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. I mean, scene matters. It does matter where you're at. And that organization is not a very good, or maybe it's on the right trajectory now, but it was not a good organization for a long time. And it's still not there yet. So you can't necessarily put that on him. But as we talked about last week as well, Jeff, he's got a track record of incredible development with players, from wide receivers to quarterbacks. And let's face reality, what are the two positions on this Bears roster that have the most upside and the most potential for development? Wide receiver and quarterback, especially with your first two first-round picks last year with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. Can Joe Brady unlock something in them that maybe not another OC another head coaching candidate can do? I think it's a very fair question. And I think that we're not talking about him enough. Jeff, I don't know if we've had this conversation yet, but Courtney Cronin was on Waddle and Sylvie. I asked Aldo if he had a clip. He doesn't have this clip, so I'm going to try to paraphrase this the best I can. She came on Waddle and Sylvie, and they told her so, or they asked her, so is Ben Johnson your choice? And she said, actually, I like Joe Brady. And for the reasons, a lot of which I just mentioned. And I don't think that he's getting enough credit. And she'd even spoken and said that I think he's a dark horse that people aren't really talking about, that he's got a legitimate shot here in Chicago. Now, like I mentioned earlier.
5.
What's that?
He's still in my top 5. He's just
I think he should be in everybody's top 5, no question. My only issue is I have no idea what are the actual chances of him landing somewhere, because I don't know the situation. I have not heard about Joe Brady interviewing anywhere yet, nor have I heard have the Bears even scheduled an interview with him. I know they requested one, but I have not even heard if they've scheduled it. And like I said, he could have interviewed yesterday. So I'm sure there's some scheduling things there, or maybe he's just not interested in interviewing for any head coaching jobs right now. I don't know. But from what I've heard from Bill's beat reporters, it does sound like he does feel like he's ready for the challenge of a head coaching job. So I don't know. And have you heard anything, Jeff? Do you know anything more than I do? Because right now I'm kind of in the dark with it. I haven't heard anything. But again, I think he's a legitimate contender, and he should have I don't think he's getting enough credit for what he really has done, or his actual possibility of being hired in Chicago.
Well, the Bears have put out through their Twitter account 13 interviewed candidates so far, and Joe Brady has not been one of them as of yet.
Correct.
So I don't know. Obviously, he's in the middle of the playoffs right now, so it's going to be hard to just get him in there. They did, however, interview Monken today in the middle of the playoffs as well, so it can happen. I'm not as high on Monken. If you guys saw last week, he's not in my. He would be outside of my top 5. I don't hate him by any stretch, but as I mentioned, some qualms I had about him last week. One of which was that I feel like he has a tendency to abandon the run game, especially when he's got a really strong run game, and that can be detrimental. So I don't want to see that. They did commit to the run last week in their win in the playoffs. So if continues to do that, it's a big deal. But in any case, I don't know. Joe Brady, he's had success in the past. Obviously, he was at LSU when they won a national championship with Joe Burrow. He coached wide receivers there that year, and he had Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. So that's obviously some real success as a coach there. I think he was the offensive coordinator in Carolina, right? And they weren't very good when he was there. So then he bounced around a little bit. He ended up in Buffalo, and he was promoted last year, like after with 6 games left or something like that, to their offensive coordinator position. Then he got the full-time job, and he's been pretty good this year, yes, in Buffalo. But again, as I said before, they have a high level offensive line, an elite quarterback in the game today. And they do have weapons all over the place. James Cook has played better with this offense than they had, the past year when he first got there. And then on top of that, their receivers have been pretty good, all things considered. So I do think that he's doing a good job there, but I don't know. I just don't know if that's the route I would take. He's another guy who's never done it. And he's not quite, the thing I said about Johnson last week is still relevant to me today. The guy is the best play caller and play designer in the league today. And I think you have to really seriously take that into consideration, because as Caleb mentioned, if that's the guy you have around for the next 20 years, that's a great thing to have. And on top of that, that's the problem with hiring a guy who's not going to be your play caller, is that now he's got to hire somebody to be his play caller. And if you have success, that guy's probably going to get hired away somewhere else. And then you got to have a new play caller. And then when he gets hired away, you got to find a new play caller. And there's got to be a constant succession plan. Whereas if you're that guy, you're with your quarterback tied together for the foreseeable future. So if it's Ben Johnson calling plays at the elite level he has the last couple of years, and he's doing that with Caleb Williams in Chicago, he's going to continue doing that with Caleb Williams in Chicago for a long time if they have success, which I anticipate they would. because as I said last week, again, they'd have to be total schmucks to hire a guy, or they'd have to hire a total schmuck on defense to not be able to lead that defense to playing good football. So that's just my thought on that. But as far as some of these other candidates, I just think that, again, there was a report. I don't know if I said this earlier. There was a report out there, and I can't remember who it came out from, but it's something along the lines of there being a 2-horse race between Ben Johnson and Mike McCarthy. I wouldn't hate it. I think those are probably the two guys that I'm leaning towards right now. I still do like Pete Carroll, but I don't think he's a real candidate. And again, you'd have to have a real legitimate succession plan at his age, and that's going to be hard to do. So I think that the two guys that are the leading candidates are my favorite personally. I just think that it's going to depend on, what they think after the interview processes and what they think about what Caleb thinks about it, and the rest of obviously the rest of the coaching staff, or the rest of the executives, I should say. So we'll see. In any case, I want to dig into something real quick that I didn't get a chance to earlier, and because we don't have a ton of time left. And I want to mention this because it's a big deal. There's an article that came out. If you guys have not read it, you absolutely have to go check it out. It's an ESPN article. So if you have ESPN Plus, you can get it. It's from Kaylin Kaler. She's in Chicago. She's a reporter out there. She works for ESPN, obviously, as I said. And so she wrote this article in regards to basically it's really mostly about the Bears in their last couple coaching searches and how they've been tied to the agents of the coaches and the general managers basically they're the same people. And it's been Trace Armstrong for the Bears the last couple cycles. So in the last two coaching hires, the last two hires, I should say, that they made, he has been the agent for those guys. He's the agent for Matt Eberflus. He's the agent for Ryan Poles. He's the agent for Matt Nagy. He was the agent for Shane Waldron and several other coaches on the staff. So there's a lot of talk that he had been a big reason why this is happening, why the guys are getting hired to whether or not they're the right guys for the job or not. So she wrote this article, and like I said, you guys have to go check it out because there's no way I could do it justice by giving you a synopsis here for a couple minutes. But in essence, it just really digs into the issue that is with these agents and how basically when teams go out to hire, they are pushed on by agents. So like, let's say they hire a GM, you should really try to pair my head coach candidate, one of these head coach candidates I have, with this GM. I think they're a fit. And they're even contacting for instance, when they have GMs or head coaches as their clients, they're trying to get them to pair with some of their other clients on the other side of that coin. So that is a real concern. And I really hope to God at this point that they avoid hiring a Trace Armstrong client, because that would, to me, signal that they're still set in these ways and they can't get away from it. I will say that there is a report that came out today, and Dan Weeder actually kind of nixed that it was a recent one. So I'm not sure how long ago it happened, but Ben Johnson is represented now by Rick Smith, not Trace Armstrong. So, but however, his agency is located in Highland Park.
I was hoping you were going to say that because, yes.
That's an interesting scenario there as well. So I don't know if there's any merit to that or if there's anything to that or not, but I do think that it's interesting. The Bears have a tendency to obviously make the wrong moves. And Tooch says that if the Bears are smart, they block Trace Armstrong's number. Spoiler alert, the Bears are not smart. They're obviously not, as we've seen over the course of history here. So, Campbell, you say the Bears are dumb too. And obviously they are. So we've seen it time and time again through this regime. So under Jordan McCaskey. So my hope is that they somehow or another get it right this time. I don't know. I don't have full confidence that they will. If they hire Mike McCarthy, I wouldn't hate that because the floor is high there. There's no doubt in my mind that they would play good football underneath him and he would correct a lot of the issues that they have. But again, I have real skepticism that they can reach a level that they really want to get to with him. So that's why I kind of prefer Ben Johnson. You kind of shoot for the stars there. And again, as I said before, everybody's looking for that next Sean McVay, that next Kyle Shanahan. If anybody in this process, to me, and Tim, you don't necessarily agree with, but I think he's really the only guy in this process that can be that guy who has the potential to be that next head coach. So we'll have to see. I personally like him. Again, as you guys have seen me talking about already now, I'm kind of leaning that way now. So we'll see what they do. But I really am going to be interested to see who this next the second interviews are, who they bring in here, because that's going to say a lot to me. I'm sure there's going to be one or two in there that you're kind of scratching your head at. Why is that the guy they're bringing in? But, I'm sure that'll happen, like I said. So, but again, as long as they have some of the guys we want to see in there, Ben Johnson, I fully anticipate being a finalist. Mike McCarthy, I anticipate being a finalist. He was actually flown in on private jet for his first interview. I believe he requested that to be the case, though. I'm not sure where that report came from, but from what I understand, he requested that he did not have a virtual interview, that he would be interviewed in person. So I'm not sure on that, but that's what I heard. And obviously you don't fly a guy in like that on a private jet. And, he had a late meeting and everything and stayed overnight and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen unless he's a serious candidate. So I expect him to be in there. I expect Johnson to be in there, and we'll see who else is on that list as well. But 3.5 thinks that Johnson could be the potential McVay. I think so too. That's kind of why I think you shoot for the stars here. But in any case, Tim, I believe you were
Brady could also be that.
You were trying to get on to another topic or something before I switched over to that article. But again, guys, please read that, because it is an excellent, excellent read. And she did a phenomenal job with her research in that article. Just fantastic reporting. So again, that was an ESPN article by Kaylin Kaler, local Chicago reporter. Go check it out.
I don't really, I'm blanking on what I was going to say earlier, but I think it had, I remember part of it. So, but first I would just want to mention that, Ben Johnson could be a McVay. I also think that there's a strong chance Brady could also be a McVay. I think they're both very innovative minds, and I wouldn't be upset with either one of them. And I think that if we were to get either one of them, Bears fans should be happy regardless. I think either one of them would be excellent candidates. I also think that we should be happy if they get Mike McCarthy. I think any of those three would be a good option. The one thing I can say about McCarthy is he's going to come in there and they're going to win games. They're going to be a playoff team, perennially. They will be a much better team. And are they going to win a Super Bowl? I don't know. It's a possibility that they could be. But at the end of the day, they are going to win more games with McCarthy. And maybe at this point, we should slow down and not necessarily say, hey, let's go win a Super Bowl next year, and at least just try to get back to the winning ways. We need to win games first, period. We need to become a playoff team before we can start talking about Super Bowls. I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse. Am I saying that we... Hold on. I'm not saying that we shouldn't aspire for that, because we should.
That's what I mean.
And if Ben Johnson is that guy, then they need to go get Ben Johnson. But if you're not sure that he is that guy, then you do need to hire a Mike McCarthy or somebody like McCarthy or Pete Carroll, somebody that is going to get you into the playoffs consistently and to build that team. It's no different than, I know this is a little bit of a different situation, but Andy Reid in Kansas City, they bring him in their perennial playoff team. They change out Alex Smith for a different quarterback, and boom, Super Bowl caliber every year. I'm not saying that that's the quarterback issue now, but my point is sometimes it just takes one thing and it can put you over the top. Maybe you bring in Mike McCarthy with this quarterback and maybe replace some of the offensive line, and boom, you have a perennial Super Bowl team. I don't know.
Maybe that's the same thing with Ben Johnson, though. He's got Jared Goff right now, who's been pretty damn good the past couple of years, but I don't think there's too many people that would argue that Caleb's ceiling isn't infinitely higher than Jared Goff's. So if he can reach that ceiling, what if that's all it takes for Ben Johnson to become a perennial Super Bowl contender? You can make the same argument there.
And again, I am not advocating for any candidate right now of the three. Or let me rephrase it. I'm advocating for all three. I'm not advocating for any one specifically. I'm just giving points of this is why you should be excited about this guy, why you should be excited about this guy, and why you should be excited about this guy. Any of those three, in my opinion, those three specifically, I think are potential home runs. Any of the three. Now, I think that Brady and Johnson for sure are more of the home run threat. They could be the two that potentially get you to the promised land. And I agree, 3.5 Houston made an argument that it's time to start gambling. And I don't disagree. The Bears do need to gamble. But I also think part of gambling is, not getting too ahead of yourself and not putting all of your eggs into one basket and then blowing your whole wad. I mean, you want to be able to make sure that you're betting on something that can hit. So again, I agree with you that I think they should take the home run higher. But, if you don't know for sure that this guy can come in and lead a football team or this locker room in general, or that he can bring a culture of winning ways, like I've mentioned, I don't know how many times on this podcast that we have to bring a winning culture, not just a culture, then I think you got to revisit what you're doing. So again, I would be fine with any of those three candidates, and I think all three of them should be serious options.
Hold right there, because Zach, I 100% agree with you on this right now. Already went all in with Caleb and Rome. Don't stop now. Exactly.
I don't disagree.
Shoot your shot. You shot your shot with those two guys. You had conviction in them, and you went for them. Now it's got to be the same thing here. If you have conviction in Ben Johnson, go get the guy.
Well, I'm going to give you a little pushback. I'm going to give you a little pushback because they did go all in on those two. But if that's the case, why did they keep Matt Eberflus around? Because that's not going all in. That's saying we think that you could possibly do this. We got to give you another shot. And listen, Jeff and I both agreed in the offseason that he probably should have been given another year just because he had a good run at the end of last year. You had to see what they had, and we were wrong, and they were wrong. But again, I don't disagree with you guys. I think everybody's making excellent points here. I just think that we need to look at this objectively from all three phases. I think any of these three candidates would be excellent, in my opinion. But I agree. If you're going to shoot your shot, in my opinion, it does have to be Johnson or Brady. And I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them. And I think that's what I'm trying to tell everybody right now is everybody's all in on Ben Johnson. I think if Ben Johnson didn't work out, there's no reason at all that you should be upset if they went with a Joe Brady. I think Joe Brady has just as much potential, if not more, than Ben Johnson. I really, truly do. Guys, go watch Joe Brady. Go watch the Bills. Go watch that offense. Go watch his press conferences. Hear how he speaks. Hear the conviction. Hear how his players talk about him. It's all the same things we're talking about with Ben Johnson.
I'm not saying it's not positive about him, but I don't agree with you that the ceiling is potentially higher. I just think Ben Johnson. You look at, like I said, he's the best play caller and play designer in the game right now. I just don't think you get a higher ceiling than that. In my
That's opinion, because people would tell you that it's Joe Brady right now.
I think
I'm not advocating either way. I'm just saying people are saying it's Brady right now.
Well, I think most people would agree that it's Ben Johnson. Not everybody would, obviously, because that's a subjective claim there. But I think most people would be in agreement that it's Ben Johnson. And again, I say shoot your shot there. So, but Joe Brady is similar. His ceiling could be that too. Yeah, because he's done it too. He's done some good things, and we don't know how good he could be either. So it's just a matter of you're gonna have to see who these staff, who the guys have as their idea to build their staffs. Like who do they want their staffs to be?
I just want to make one more point about Joe Brady really quick. Everybody has mentioned that, he walked into a great situation because he had Josh Allen and that great offense. But I can prove to you pretty quickly, excuse me, that it's not all just about that. Sometimes coaching matters. Because when Daboll left, John Dorsey took over as the offensive coordinator, which was, by the way, Josh Allen's handpicked OC. That's who he wanted. And immediately the offense went downward spiral. From that point on, he had one full year. It was okay. Started going down. Goes into the next year. The offense is just flat. They fire him and they promote Joe Brady, and instantly, boom, right away, offense skyrockets again. Joe Brady. And it's gone to another level. So that's where I'm telling you, I do think coaching still matters in that scenario. Because you can have all the talent in the world. The Bears had all the talent in the world this year on offense, with the exception of the offensive line. And coaching matters. They did not have anybody that could elevate the offense in that room. I think Thomas Brown did an okay job. But again, not his offense, brought into a bad situation, and even worse circumstance. So my point being, coaching matters. And to say that Brady has kind of been, gifted a situation, yeah, possibly, but he also elevated that situation when it was faltering at the time. So do we know what do we know How Ben Johnson has done in that situation? No, because we haven't seen it yet. But his offense has been consistent for 3 years. They've been good, and they've elevated for 3 years well. The one thing I will mention about both candidates, both run games in Buffalo and Detroit are both excellent, which is something that the Bears truly need to bring back, is a very good running team like we had a couple of years ago. You got to help your young quarterback out. How can you help him out? By having a strong run game, and they clearly need help there. Running backs, positionally, they need to add another piece, and coaching. They need to get a play caller that's going to run the ball more.
Yeah, I gave you guys my piece about the whole thing. I don't disagree with you. I think Brady would, he has high potential as well. I just don't know. Tooch says that whether Ben Johnson goes to Raiders or Bears, he'll take over a team that's looking up at 3 playoff teams in their divisions. The Bears have a quarterback and no Andy Reid in their division. So that's obviously, to me, that's the difference. There is you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to have your quarterback. The Raiders don't have a high enough draft pick to get their savior at this point, and right now they don't have a legitimate quarterback at the helm. So do you want to gamble there and take that risk of not getting the right guy? Because, you're probably going to have to be pretty bad in the first year if you want to have a high enough pick to get your guy next year. Otherwise, you're going to take a gamble on a free agent like a Sam Darnold or something. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. I just think that I tend to agree that, with Tooch there, that the biggest difference to me is that, the Bears have the quarterback and the Raiders don't. So, that's kind of my take. There's a few questions in here I want to get to real quick before we get out of here. 3 Point has a couple of them that are similar here. He says he doesn't quite get the Kingsbury hate, and he wants to know if we agreed, had they hired Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator instead of Waldron, would we have made the playoff? I think that's an interesting point.
Can I address this quickly?
Likelihood that they could have. I will say that Washington has a much better offensive line than the Bears do. And the Bears, what they have is a legitimate center that I wanted the Bears to get last year in Tyler Biadasz in the offseason, and instead Washington signed him.
Aldo agrees with you too.
I know. I was really upset about that one, but in any case, they're having success over there with him. So I do think it's a possibility. Yes. 3.5, a likelihood. I don't know. It's hard for me to speak in, what ifs there, but I think it's seriously possible. Yes. Because of what he's done over there as an offensive coordinator in Washington. Now there is an argument to be made that in the second half of the season, his teams kind of fall off offensively, and they did see a dip in their production on offense the second half of this year, but they just had a pretty impressive playoff game. So, we'll see how far they go with their rookie quarterback, but he's been pretty impressive there with Jaden Daniels. We'll have to see, how they continue to progress, but I think he could have been good with Caleb. Yeah. But that's why I want to pair someone like Ben Johnson with Caleb to be that guy who's there for a long time, that young guy who can probably connect with him a little bit better than a Mike McCarthy could, at least in my opinion. So, and that's just my thought on that. You have any thoughts on that, Tim, before
I would just say, to me, do I think that they would have made the playoffs? I think they would have had a much stronger possibility for sure, because he definitely leaned in on that college style with Jaden Daniels so that he didn't have to change a whole lot. He really just transitioned right into the NFL pretty easily. I thought he did a very good job of that. And I think that if that was the case, the Bears had, in my opinion, they had a better roster than Washington did, would have had a better chance at that. But I will say, he asked what was I don't know if the word was, what's the hate on Kingsbury? I can't remember exactly what the comment was, but in my opinion, I just think that his style is not sustainable for a quarterback or for an offense. It's just not. You can't continue to coach that way and get a lot of success over and over and over again every year. I just think that it's not developed enough. He made it very easy on Jaden because it was just one read throw. I don't foresee that working long-term in the NFL. It just doesn't. Teams pick up on that pretty quickly on defense. And I'm going to say this, I don't know this, and I don't wish anything bad on the kid, but I do see a lot of RG3 in Jaden Daniels. And oddly enough, he plays for the same football team, Washington. I see a lot of similarity there. And I'm sorry, I have zero desire to have Cliff Kingsbury as my head coach because he's already failed as a head coach twice, once in college and once in the NFL.
I thought it was odd that Arizona hired him in the first place because he wasn't even that successful at Texas Tech when he was there. So I thought it was odd myself.
Couldn't win with Patrick Mahomes.
It wasn't just because of, that team was bad. But in any case, I don't really love Kingsbury either. I don't hate him. I just don't know that. I think he's a much better offensive coordinator than he is a head coach for sure. So we'll have to see. But what
I'm confused though. 3.5 just said that he had his reservations too about it. Now he said, "I'm not his brother anymore." So I don't know where they are. I don't know what changed his mind that quick, but I don't know.
Tim, you suck. But anyways,
you're an idiot.
We appreciate you guys being here tonight. Tucci had a nice comment for us saying, "Great show tonight, fellas." I'm going to have to go check out the State of Affairs tomorrow, as Aldo mentioned in the chat here tonight. Also, guys, go check out Bare Their Souls with Tucci's State of Affairs. They're always excellent, and apparently it's even more over the top this time. So I'll have to go check it out myself. Let's all do that. But as always, guys, please do us a favor. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, give us all a follow. You can follow our executive producer, Aldo Gandia, at Barroom Network. You can follow myself at _Jeff Willis, and you can follow Tim at Tim Willis24. Those are all on X, formerly known as Twitter. So thanks again, guys, as always, for being here. And until next time, bear down.
Got Bears.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.